The house is still there. Same foundation, same front porch with the slight lean on the left side that was there when you moved in and that you told yourself you would fix before the first winter and never did. Same oak tree in the backyard that was barely taller than the fence in 1990 and now clears the roofline by 12 feet and shades the entire yard from mid-morning until late afternoon in the summer. 35 years later, one version of you owns it outright, has owned it outright for 11 years, and has been quietly redirecting what used to be a mortgage payment into something that has been compounding without interruption since before most people you work with started their careers. The other version of you is 58 years old and owes $219,000 on a house you bought 9 years ago, and the loan does not resolve until 2041, when you will be 74 years old and likely no longer working, and still writing a check to a bank every month for a house you have lived in for less than a decade. Nothing dramatic separated these two lives. The same starting salary, the same neighborhood, the same 30-year loan signed on the same kind of Tuesday with the same kind of pen at the same kind of bank branch with the fluorescent lighting and the bowl of hard candy at the teller's window that you took one of without thinking about it. Just a decision, made quietly and without full understanding at the beginning, that compounded in silence for 35 years until the gap between the two outcomes became the kind of number that does not feel real until you write it down, and then feels completely real in a way you cannot go back from. You were 23 years old in 1990. You were working as a junior accountant at a regional firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. The salary's $34,000 a year. You are not flush. You are not struggling. You are in the specific middle that most first jobs produce, which is the feeling of having just enough to make decisions that will define the next 4 decades without fully understanding that that is what you were doing at the time you were doing it. The house costs $106,000. 3 bedrooms, a small dining room that gets good afternoon light in a way you notice the first time you walk through and then forget about, and then rediscover on an ordinary Saturday morning 6 months after moving in and think about for the rest of your life. A backyard with the oak tree and a detached garage that leans slightly to the east and that you tell yourself you will fix eventually. The mortgage is a 30-year fixed at 8.75%. Monthly payment, $834. You sign the papers on a Tuesday in April. You drive to the house alone afterward and sit in the empty living room on the floor because you do not own furniture yet, and you eat a sandwich from a gas station, and you feel something that is hard to name but is somewhere between pride and terror and the quiet, specific weight of a commitment long enough that you cannot see the end of it from where you were sitting. In one version of your life, you stay. Not dramatically, not as a philosophical statement about simplicity or patience or any principle you could articulate to someone who asked. You stay the way people stay when nothing is pushing them strongly enough to leave, and the pull towards somewhere else never quite outweighs the friction of going. The neighborhood is decent, the commute is 20 minutes on a road you know well enough to drive without thinking. The dining room light on Saturday morning keeps being what it was the first time you noticed it. The oak tree in the backyard keeps growing without asking you to do anything. You stay. In the other version of your life, you leave. But not yet. Not in the beginning. In the beginning, both versions of you are living in the same house, on the same street, making the same payment, and watching the same mortgage balance barely move, because that is what the early years of a long loan do to you. They take almost everything and give almost nothing back in a visible way. In year 1 of a 30-year mortgage at 8.75%, more than 90% of your monthly payment disappears into interest before a single dollar touches the principal you actually own. You feel this without fully understanding it. The statement arrives every month, the balance moves a small amount, you move on. You are 23. There are more immediate things to think about. The first test arrives in 1997. You have been in the house for 7 years. You got a promotion in 1994 and another in 1996. You're earning $51,000 now, which in the context of where you started feels like a real number. A colleague at work mentions a neighborhood 20 minutes north of where you live. Newer construction, larger lots, a community pool that the kids in the neighborhood apparently use from May until September. The houses are going for around $180,000, and the interest rates have come down considerably from the highs of 1990. In one version of your life, your phone rings on a Thursday evening. A realtor your colleague recommended. She is pleasant and speaks in the easy, confident shorthand someone who has made this particular case hundreds hundreds of times to hundreds of people in houses just like yours at moments that feel just like this one. She says the timing is favorable. She says you have built equity. She says the move makes complete sense and that the neighborhood she is describing has been appreciating consistently for 4 years. You think about the pool. You think about the extra bedroom that has been on your mind since last Christmas when everyone visiting felt smaller than usual. You think about the garage that still leans and that you have still not fixed. You say yes.
Here is what nobody mentions at the closing table when you get there. Every time you sell a house and buy another one, somewhere between 8 and 10% of your property's value simply leaves. Not into the new house, not into your equity. It leaves. Agent commissions run 5 to 6% of the sale price. Closing costs, title fees, transfer taxes, escrow, and recording fees on both ends add another 2 to 3%. On a house worth around $135,000 in 1997, that friction lands at roughly $11,000 to $14,000 that passes through your hands on the way to a title company and a brokerage and a county recorder's office and does not compound into anything because it never gets the chance. Here is what 7 years of payments actually built you. 7 years of $834 a month. 84 payments sent without missing one, the majority of each one going to interest in the front-loaded early years of the loan. The actual principal you paid down in 7 years at 8.75% is somewhere around $9,000 to $11,000. You spent $11,000 to $14,000 in transaction friction to access $9,000 to $11,000 in equity. You walked out of one house and into another, and the mechanics of the transaction itself consumed more than everything you accumulated. You did not lose money in any dramatic sense. You made a completely normal decision. That is precisely what makes it worth understanding. In the other version of your life, the phone rings on a Thursday and you let it go to voicemail. You listen to the message once and you do not call back. Not because you have calculated the transaction friction on a spreadsheet. You have not. Not because you have a principle about staying put. You do not. You simply do not have a compelling enough reason to go through everything a move requires, and the dining room light is still good on Saturday mornings, and the oak tree is genuinely starting to become something worth noticing. You add $250 to your monthly mortgage payments starting in January of 1998. You set it up as an automatic transfer. The bank does not acknowledge it. Nothing in your life looks different the morning after you do it. You move on. But the $250 has started doing something that you will not be able to see clearly for another decade, and that will determine the shape of the next 30 years more than any other single financial decision you make. The second test arrives in 2005. This one does not arrive as a phone call. It arrives as the ambient noise of every conversation around you for an entire year. Everyone is moving. Everyone is upgrading. The housing market has been climbing for so long that people have stopped treating appreciation as a pleasant surprise and started treating it as a baseline expectation. Your coworker refinanced and pulled $60,000 in equity and redid her kitchen, and the photographs genuinely look remarkable. Your brother bought in the suburbs, and the value is up 22% in 18 months. At every dinner and every backyard gathering, the conversation has the same current underneath it. The equity is there. The rates are still manageable. You would be standing still while everything moves around you. In one version of your life, you've been in house number 2 since 1997, 8 years. The neighborhood delivered everything the realtor described, but the market has climbed, and the math on one more upgrade is genuinely compelling. You have 2 kids now in middle school, and the high school in the district 2 zip codes over has a reputation that the high school in your current district does not. The case for moving is not manufactured. It is real. You call the realtor. The transaction costs on the 1997 house, now worth approximately $220,000, land at roughly $18,000 to $22,000 on the way out. You have been in the house for 8 years and paid down somewhere around $22,000 to $25,000 in principal. The friction of this transaction consumes nearly everything you built in 8 years of payments. You walk into house number 3 at almost precisely the same equity position you walked into house number 2, and the loan resets back to year 1, back to the place where 75 to 80% of every payment disappears before a dollar touches what you actually own. The interest rate is lower than it was in 1997. The balance is higher than it has ever been.
The payoff date is 30 years from a Tuesday in 2005, which puts it at 2035, when you will be 68 years old. In the other version of your life, you were still in the first house in 2005, 15 years. The oak tree in the backyard is something people comment on when they see it for the first time. You had a neighbor over for a cookout in the summer, and he stood at the back sliding door looking at it for a moment before he said anything, and what he said was simply, "That's a serious tree." It is. The extra $250 a month you've been adding to the principal since 1998 has been working on your balance for 7 years. Your remaining balance in 2005 is under $58,000 on a loan you took out at $106,000. You own more than half the house in real, unencumbered terms in a market that has been appreciating for a decade. The schools in your district are adequate, not exceptional, adequate. The space is manageable. You stay. The third test in 2020 is the loudest of the three and the most seductive because it doesn't come dressed as temptation. It comes dressed as financial responsibility. 30-year fixed rates have dropped to 2.9%, the lowest number anyone has seen in the recorded history of the mortgage market. Your financial advisor calls twice in 1 week. Your sister refinanced in September and sends you a text with the monthly savings highlighted. Every financial news source you read is describing the same window and calling it historic and implying, without quite saying it, that not acting is the irresponsible choice. In one version of your life, you are 49 years old in the fall of 2020, carrying $190,000 at 6.1% on the house you bought in 2005, after refinancing once in 2012 to pay for a renovation that the house genuinely needed. The refinancing case into 2.9 on a new 30-year with cash out to eliminate the renovation debt is airtight when you look at it on a Wednesday night on a mortgage calculator at 11:15. The monthly payment drops. The rate drops. You call your advisor back the next morning. What the calculator does not show you on Wednesday night is what 15 years into a mortgage actually means. You were paying more principal than interest for the first time. The loan was shrinking in a way you could feel in the statements. The ratio had finally shifted in your direction. The rate went down. The debt went up. The payoff date is now 2050. You will be 79 years old.
In the other version of your life, the fall of 2020 is quiet. The calls come, your sister texts, your advisor leaves a voicemail. Your remaining balance in 2020 is under $19,000. You have been sending the extra $250 every single month since 1998. 22 years of uninterrupted transfers. You are not refinancing $19,000. You are watching the number get smaller every month and doing nothing else because nothing else is required. Your last mortgage payment clears in August of 2022, 32 years after you signed the papers in April of 1990. The extra $250 a month pulled the payoff date forward by nearly 3 years. The bank sends a letter confirming the lien release. You read it on a Thursday morning before work, put it on the kitchen counter, pour another cup of coffee, and go to work. There is no ceremony. There was never going to be a ceremony. That is not how this kind of thing works. What happens when a mortgage disappears? $834 a month stops leaving your account. Your housing cost drops to property taxes and insurance, which run about $260 a month in your market. The remaining $574 needs somewhere to go, and you send it where you have always sent the money that needed somewhere to go. An automatic transfer into a low-cost index fund, set up on the first of the month. No fanfare, no announcement. The same habit you built in 1998 when you added $250 to the principal payment and forgot about it within a week. It is 2025. You are 58 years old. Both versions of you woke up this morning and made coffee and went to work, or did not go to work, depending on which version of this story belongs to you. In one version, your remaining mortgage balance is approximately $219,000. The 2020 refinance locked you into a loan that does not resolve until 2050. The payment is $1,043 a month at 2.9%. The house is worth more than you paid,
Everything looks fine from the outside. You're 58 years old with a mortgage that will outlast your career by more than a decade if you retire at a reasonable age. And the freedom that comes from no housing payment is not something you'll experience before you stop working. In the other version, you have not had a mortgage payment since August of 2022. The index fund that started receiving $574 a month 3 years ago is doing what index funds do when you leave them alone. The oak tree in the backyard is enormous. The garage still leans slightly to the east. You never fixed it. Some things you simply decide to live with and discover over time that they are not the things that mattered. You could retire this year, not with a yacht or a second property or anything that requires a photograph to prove it happened, with the specific, unglamorous freedom of not needing next month's paycheck to cover next month's expenses. That freedom has one source and one source only, not a salary that grew faster than your neighbor's, not an investment that performed exceptionally, not timing or luck or information you had that someone else did not. Just the decision not to move, made 3 separate times, at 3 separate moments, when moving was the obvious thing, and staying required no explanation because no explanation was asked for. The first time in 1997, when the realtor called on a Thursday. The second time in 2005, when everyone around you was upgrading, and the market rewarded every conversation about it. The third time in 2020, when the rate was historic, and the case for starting over looked exactly like the responsible choice. 3 moments, 3 quiet decisions, 35 years of math running underneath a life without interruption. The oak tree did not ask for recognition when it was growing. It simply kept going down before it went up. The roots spread under the yard for years before the canopy became something worth standing under. That is what staying in one house for 35 years does to the financial structure underneath your life. It grows roots you cannot see from the outside and that only reveal their depth when something tries to knock the whole thing over. You are 58 years old in one version of this story, and the house is yours, and the mortgage is gone, and the transfer runs on the 1st of every month, and the oak tree shades the entire backyard from mid-morning until late afternoon. Nobody noticed. Nobody congratulated you. Nobody asked about it at dinner. That is exactly why it worked.